Dr. Bryant, I really appreciate you taking the time. Walk me through, what was your reaction to the vice presidential debate?
Look, if you were a partisan, you're going to walk away from this debate thinking your guy did pretty well. The reality is the post-debate reaction has been this thing was a tie. But if you look at the data and you look at the breakdown partisan-wise, Democrats think Tim Walz did wonderfully. Republicans think J.D. Vance did wonderfully. There is going to be a discussion, though, about two things, I believe. On the left, particularly among the political elites, I saw a lot of the coverage. There was a possible criticism of the governor's approach that perhaps he was too civil, that perhaps he didn't drive a hard enough contrast with the senator. And so there'll be a discussion about wait a minute, if this indeed is the existential crisis election that it is, how do you, as a candidate running against Donald Trump and J.D. Vance, treat them as normal candidates, right? That's the criticism coming from some parts of the left. On the other hand, there's going to be a lot of discussion about the fact that Senator Vance couldn't refused to answer the question about the 2020 election result and whether or not Donald Trump lost that election and what that portends for the next few months as we go into a new election and whether there's going to be further chaos as a result of what happens on November the 5th. And so there's going to be discussion on both ends about whether or not they came away from this debate unscathed, but but the reality is, when you look at and just from my general impression as I watched, both men comported themselves pretty well. Their favorability we saw in the data both went up. And I think it's probably because people want to have what that debate was, which was relatively civil. They want people to have political differences but find commonality where commonality is. And I believe both candidates did that. They did that multiple times throughout the night. And the people that indeed are watching that were truly undecided, because I don't believe a lot of undecided voters are actually watching that thing. If you were truly undecided, though, you watch that and you go, that was a pretty spirited conversation. And I think I like both guys coming away from that.
Anything in particular, policy wise or regarding the interactions between the candidates, that stood out to you during the debate?
Well, I think, again, if you look at the questions that each of the campaigns are really trying to drive and the contrast that they're really trying to drive, on the Trump campaign wants to talk about immigration. And so JD Vance doubled down. There was a whole back and forth. The mic got cut off or talking about Haitian migrants in Springfield, and the moderators got involved. That is going to endure. That's going to live on. The Trump campaign seems to want to continue to discuss this issue of asylum seekers and migrants in the U.S. as a part of a broader discussion about immigration in the United States. Whereas the Harris campaign, as was talked about by Governor Walz, where he talked about housing a lot, he talked about the ACA, protecting the ACA and healthcare. And of course, abortion is something that the Democratic Party wants to keep top of mind for voters as they go and decide who is going to take over the reins for the next 4 years. And so I believe the candidates on that stage stuck to the script, even though, as I would say, the broader takeaway is that this is a debate from a political bygone era.
What do you mean by that?
It was civil. There was no shouting. There were no insults. There was commonality found. The candidates seemed to respect each other, at least on that stage. They seemed to respect each other in that discussion. And because of that, I think, as we will see in the data, people are going to, that's what people are craving. You hear that often. Why can't we return to civility? That's what that debate was. It was almost like it was from 2004 and not 2024, right? And that, I think, is going to be the ultimate takeaway from this debate.
I'm gonna ask you a two-part question. You'll be able to guess what my second question is after this. What impact do vice presidential debates normally have on the election?
That's my answer. Very little, if any. People don't even remember who the vice president is, let alone who the vice president debated in the last presidential election. I would challenge most people to think about who in 2004 were a part of the vice presidential debate. And most people are not going to remember that, as well, most people will not remember what happened last night. It's not going to have a huge impact on this election because people vote for the top of the ticket. They understand that Donald Trump or Kamala Harris will be president of the United States in January, and that is what they're focused on when they go to vote.
So do you feel as though any voters could have been convinced after last night to go one way or the other?
No, I think what last night was an opportunity for those who are already committed to one party or the other. It was a rah-rah moment, right? It was an opportunity for their candidate to reaffirm and re-articulate whatever the arguments are coming from these campaigns on each side in these last few weeks. That's what these candidates did. And so it was about speaking to voters who are already committed, not so much speaking to your undecided voters, because again, undecided voters are not watching a vice presidential debate on a Tuesday night.
Is there anything else you'd like our audience to know about this debate?
These debates are about political theater. The people who are watching and tuning into these debates are watching because they enjoy the theater of politics. They are already committed to one team or the other. If indeed you are truly undecided, you're probably only going to catch the clips from this debate, and the clips are what's going to go viral. And the clips of the mic being cut off during the exchange on the migrant back and forth, and the clip about January 6th, where JD Vance would not acknowledge that Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, that's going to also go all over the internet. And we're going to see ultimately what happens, what comes from this. My argument is that not much. It's just going to reaffirm the basis.
You feel those were the biggest moments during the debate, the mic cut and the January 6th
Those
interaction?
are the most. Those are the ones that are going to be that I've already seen floating around online and discussed online. The we weren't supposed to have fact checkers, and the not answering the question about whether or not to certify the election in 2020.